Right on time. Hello, Norma.
Hey.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Put my mask on.
Hey, how are your girls?
They're all well, thank you.
Are they in
They're living life. Look at it.
Where's Lester now? I know that Emma's down still in.
So Lester is working at Plymouth Plantation and has been living down in Plymouth and has just gotten an apartment with some friends in Braintree. And Emma's doing an internship in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
This semester. She was sick of COVID, college COVID.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't be?
Can't really blame her.
No.
Yeah.
Sick of college COVID makes perfect sense to
It was
me.
a good choice for her.
Yeah.
And my parents love it because she lives my folks live, most of my family still in D.C.
Oh, well, that's
So
nice.
it's been very nice.
Where do they live?
They live in Bethesda, Maryland. Right
Oh,
outside.
that's, I grew up, was born in Washington. My family lives in Bethesda. My brother and his family. So I actually went there for about mitzvah. And you talk about the entire COVID, I just said, I'm boosted, I'm vaxxed. I said, I'm just going. It was fun.
Well, we went to my nephew's wedding reception. He got married last year, and they finally had a party.
Yeah.
And the good news was that no one got infected. So
Oh, that's good.
That's good.
All right, so we will turn to page. Good morning, Sivya. Turn to page 101. Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, mishkanotecha Yisrael, v'ani berov chastecha, ahavu v'hetecha, eshtachave ehilcha kodshecha, v'yiratecha, Adonai ahavti, mehon betecha, humkom mishkan, Mishkan kivodecha, va'ani eshtachave ve'echra'a, evrecha lifnei Adonai osi, va'ani tefilati, lecha Adonai tratzon, Elohim berov chastecha, aneni, b'emet, I invite you to rise, page 103. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan l'sechvi bina l'havchi ben yom uven lahela. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shesani b'tzalmo. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shesani ben chorin. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shesani Yisrael. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam pokeach ivrim. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam malbish harumim. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam matir asurim. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam zokef kefufim. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam roka haaretz al hamayim. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamechin mitzadei gaver. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shesali kol tzorki. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ozer Yisrael b'gvura. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam oter Yisrael b'tifara. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam anoten layayif koach. Baruch. You may be seated. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam ha'me'avishin amen. Yiratzon milfnech Adonai Eloheinu v'lo evotenu v'imotenu shetog aleinu b'toratech v'dapnim b'mitzvotech v'alteidim. Page 104. Leidina say below you David Zayin v'hol tishlei bana yetzer harav archikenu me'adam ra u'mechavera v'dapkenu b'yetzer hatov v'ma'asim tovim v'chof yetitzenu b'yisrael v'lach utneinu ayam l'chol yom l'cheinu l'chesed rachmi be'enecha u'v'nei chol ro'enu b'gibelenu chasadim tovim baruch ata Adonai gomel chasadim tovim Le'amo Yisrael. Page 105. Le'olam yed amadei shamayim v'sitr v'elohi u'madei emet v'dover emet b'levavo yeshkim yomer. Master of all the worlds, not upon our merit do we rely in pleading before you, but upon your great compassion. What are we? What is our life? Our goodness, our righteousness, our achievement, our power, our victories? What shall we say in your presence, Adonai, our God, God of our ancestors? Heroes count as nothing in your presence. The famous is as though they had never been. The wise seem ignorant. The clever is lacking reason. For the sum of our deeds is chaos. In your presence our lives seem futile. Human beings have no superiority over beasts. For all is fleeting. Aval anachnu mechal b'nei v'ritecha b'nei Avraham uhavta. Shenishbata lo b'har haMoriah zer Yitzchak yichido. Shene'ekad agabei hamizbeach hadad Yaakov bincha bechorecha. Sheme'avatecha she'ahavta oto. U'misimchatecha she'samachta bo. Karata et shemo Yisrael b'shurun. Page 106. Lefichach anachnu chayavim lahodol lecha. Ashreinu ma tov chelkenu ma'anayim gorelenu ma'anei yafa Yerushatenu. Ashreinu she'nachnu mashkimim mo'arim erev habocher omrim b'hamayim b'chol yom. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam. Page 107, we can say together, Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kedshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. May you make the words of your Torah sweet in our mouths and in the mouths of the house of Israel, your people, so that we, our children, and all the children of the house of Israel may come to know your name and study Torah for its own sake. Lishma. Baruch Ata Adonai HaMelamed Torah La'amu Yisrael Baruch Ata. Yivrecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, ya'er Adonai panav elecha, v'yichuneka, yisa Adonai panav elecha, v'yasem lecha shalom. Elu divrei she'en lachem shiur ha'piyah. Elu divrei she'adam mocher parutim b'olam hazeh, v'keren kayemet lo v'hama. Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Right, so we will turn now to page 120. Mizmor Shir Chanukat HaBayit LeDavid Armimcha Adonai Kilei Letanai Velo Simachta Oyevahevi. I raised up my voice to praise you, Adonai, for you have lifted me up and not allowed my enemies to rejoice over me. Adonai, my God, I cried out to you and you healed me. Adonai, you raised me up from Sheol, you gave me life and did not let me descend into the pit. Sing to Adonai, faithful people, praise God as you pronounce God's name. Surely God's anger lasts but for a moment, and only when God is pleased, life is granted. One may lay down crying at night, but wake in the morning with joyful song. Ba'erev yalin bechi u'levaboker rina, v'ani amarti b'shalvi ba'alemot le'olam. Adonai b'rtzoncha ha'amarta lahared oz. Histarta panecha hayit nivhal. Elecha Adonai ekra, v'el Adonai etchana. Elecha Adonai ekra, v'el Adonai etchana. Shema Adonai v'choneni, Adonai ye'ozeli. Shema Adonai v'choneni, Shema Adonai v'choneni, Shema Adonai v'choneni, Adonai ye'ozeli. Hafachta mispadi lemachuli, pitachta saki v'ta'azuni simcha, למען יזמרך כבוד ולא ידום אדוני אלוהי לעולם עודך. I invite you to rise as you are able, page 122 for Pesukei de Zimmer. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch oseh b'reshit, Baruch omer b'yosef, Baruch ozer kayim, Baruch merechem al haaretz, Baruch merechem al habariyot, Baruch meshalem sachar tov le'iriyah, Baruch ha'elad v'kayam la'netzach, Baruch kodeh u'matzil, Baruch Shemo. May be seated. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ha'ela v'rachaman v'hala b'fiyamu, mishubach v'rei mishchon chesadav v'avadav, uv'shirei David abdecha, na'alech Adonai Eloheinu b'shvachot u'zmirot, ונגלגלך ונשבחך ונפארך ונזכיר שמך ונמליכך מלכנו אלוהינו יחיד חיי העולמים מלך משובח ומפאר עד היד שמו גדול ברוך אתה אדוני מלך העולם ותשפחות page 123 הודו לאדוני קראי ושמו הודיע לימים אלילותיו שירו לו זמרו לו שיחו בכל נפלאותיו. Seed of Israel, God's servant, treasured children of Jacob, Adonai is our God. All the earth is subject to God's laws. Always remember God's covenant words binding for 1,000 generations, made with Abraham, promised with Isaac, and affirmed to a decree to Jacob, an everlasting covenant with Israel, saying, I will give you the land of Canaan as your apportioned inheritance. Behold, page 124. Shir l'Adonai kol ha'aretz basru miyom el yom yeshuato sapru v'goyim et kavodo bechol ha'amim niflaotav ki gadol Adonai molameo v'norahu al kol Elohim ki kol Elohei amim erelim v'Adonai shamayim asa hod v'hadar lefanav oz v'edva bimkomo Havu l'Adonai mishpachot amim havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz havu l'Adonai kavod shemo se'u mincha va'ov lefav השתחוו לאדוני בהדרת קודש חילו מלפניו כל הארץ אף תיכון תבל בל תמהות ישמחו השמיים ישמחו השמיים ישמחו השמיים ותגר הארץ ישמחו השמיים השמיים ישמחו השמיים השמיים ישמחו השמיים ותגר הארץ ירם הים ירם הים ירם הים ומלואו ירם הים ירם הים ירם הים ומלואו ישמחו השמיים ישמחו השמיים ישמחו השמיים ותגר הארץ אז ירנצי היער מלפני לוי לפני אדוני קיווה לשפוט את הארץ. Give thanks Adonai for God is good, for God's love endures forever. Say, rescue us, God of our deliverance. Gather us up and save us from amidst the nations, that we may be praise your holy name and be bow in praise of you. Blessed be Adonai, O God of Israel, forever and ever. Then all the people responded, Amen. May Adonai be praised. Okay, we will turn, let's see, now to page 129. Irv, would you read that Psalm 90 in English, please? Page 129.
Lord, you've been a refuge in every generation, before mountains were born, before you shaped earth and land. From the very beginning, at the end of time, you are God.
It's dust saying, return, children of Adam.
In your sight, 1,000 years are but a yesterday that is past, a watch in the night.
People's lives throw by as in dames, fresh grass at daybreak newly sprouted, dried up and withered in the night.
We are consumed by your anger, terrified by your fury. You set our sins before you, our secrets before the light of your face.
For all our days face your wrath, our years end like a sigh. 70 years are spent thus, or if we are given strength, 80.
Most of them filled with toil and fatigue. The years rush by quickly and we disappear. Who can realize the strength of your anger? The fear of you matches your wrath.
Teach us to make our days count, and so acquire a heart that is wise.
Turn us out of mind, how long the wait? Comfort your servants, at daybreak satisfy us with your loving kindness, that we may sing with joy all our days.
Grant us days of happiness equal to those we suffered, the years we saw so much wrong. May your servants see your deeds. May your glory be upon their children. Ihi nomar Adonai Eloheinu aleinu umasei yadenu konana aleinu umasei yadenu konanehu. Page 134. Page 134. Mizmor shir le'am Shabbat tov lodot l'Adonai lo zamer shimcha elyon l'agib b'bocher stech b'matchiv l'adei asur. כי שמחת בכל לך במעשה ידינו, מה גדלו מעשה אדוני מאוד המחו, מחשבותיך ישברו. צדיק התמר יפרח כארז בלבנון יזכה שתולים בבית אדוני בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו דנבון בשיבה דשנים ורענים יחיו להגיד כי אשר אדוני צוי ולא עוולתה בו. Page 136. אשרי יושבי ביתך עוד יהללו חסלה. תהילה לדוד ארמימך אלוהי המלך ויברך שמך לעולם ועד. גדול אדוני ומולו מאוד ולגדולתו אין חקר. הדר כבוד עודך ודברי נפלאותיך עשיך. זכר רב טובך יביאו וצדקתך ירננו. טוב אדוני לכו ורחמיו על כל מעשיו. כבוד מלכותך יאמרו וגבורתך ידברו. מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. עיניך ולך יסברו ואתה נותן להם את אוכלם בעתו. צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו וחסיד בכל מעשיו. חרצון יראה ויעשה ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם. תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד ואנחנו נברך אתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah. Page 141. Hallelujah, 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 El B'Kodsho. Hallelujah, hallelujah, Birki Ya'uzo. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 vigvurotav. Hallelujah, hallelujah, karov gudlo. Hallelujah, 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 v'teka shofar. Hallelujah, hallelujah, benevel v'chinor. Hallelujah, 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 betof umachor. Hallelujah, hallelujah, beminim ve'ugav. Hallelujah, 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 Hallelu, Hallelu, B'tziltzalei Shama. Hallelu, Hallelu, B'tziltzalei Teruah. Kol HaNeshama Tehallelya. Kol HaNeshama Tehallelya. Hallelujah. Kol HaNeshama Tehallelya. Hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Amen V'Amen. Baruch Adonai Mitzion Shochem Yerushalayim. Hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Elohim Elohei Yisrael Usin Niflot Levado. U'Baruch Shem Kavodo Le'olam. V'Yimalech Kavodo Et Kol Haaretz. Amen V'Amen. Page 145. Anishmat Kol Chai Tivarech Et Shemcha Adonai Eloheinu. Lonu melech eleata Elohei. לך לבדך אנחנו בודים אלופינו מלא שיר הקיים ושנוננו רינה כהמון גלה ושפתותינו שווה כמחווה רקיע ועיני מהרות כשמש וכירח ידינו כרשות כנשרי שמיים ורגלינו קלות כאלות אין אנחנו מספיקים להודות לך אדוני אלוהינו ולא עבדים ממתנו ולברך את שמך על אחת מאלף אלפי אלפים וריבי רבבות פעמים הטובות שעשית עם אבותינו ואמותינו ועמנו. page 136 ממצרים גלתנו. כי כל פה לך לא יודו וכל לשון לך תשבע וכל ברך לך תכרע וכל קומה לפניך תשתחווה וכל לבבות יראוך וכל קרב וכליות יזמרו לשמך כדבר שכתוב כל עצמותיי תאמרנה אדוני מי כמוך מצילני מחזק ממנו ועני ואביון מגוזלו מי ידמה לך ומי ישווה לך ומי ירוך לך האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון קונה שמיים וארץ נעלה לך ונשבח ונברך את שם קודשך כאמור לדוד ברכי נפשי את אדוני וכל קרבי את שם קודשו האל בתעצומות עוזך הגדול ביכוד שמך הגיבור לנצח והנורא בנורותיך המלך היושב על כיסא רם ונישא. Shabbat Shalom. Great to see you, Ellen. Lovely to see you, Maury. We will turn the reins over to Norma. At this point, it looks like we only have one person on the internet, so we are going to be dispensing so far with anything that requires a meeting. So we'll go directly into the first program.
Is there anyone here who'd be in the least bit uncomfortable if I take off my mask? No. Speak now, forever hold your peace. Okay.
Take it all off.
Or at least hold your peace until after services and then lay it on.
What? Shochem ad marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv rananu tzadikim baranai laisharim nava tehila b'fi yesharim tithalal uvdivrei tzadikim titbarach uvilshon chasidim titramam uvikerev kadoshim titkadash uvmakalot uvavot amcha bet Yisrael Rinayit v'ershucha makenu b'chol dor v'dor Shechen chovat kol hayatzurim lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu
להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר, לרמים, להדיר, לבורך, להלל, לקלס, על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות, דוד בן ישי, עבדך, משיחך. Page 148. Yishtabach Shimcha Lad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaKadosh B'Shamayim V'Aretz Ki L'chona Adonai Eloheinu V'Elahei Aviteinu V'Yimotenu Shiru Shvacha Hallel V'Zimra Oz Memshala Netzach Gedula Ugvura Tehila V'Tiferet Kedusha U'Malchut Barachot V'Hodaot Me'ata V'Yad Olam Baruch Atah Adonai El Melech Gadol Batishbachot El HaHodaot Adon HaNiflaot Habocher B'Shirei Zimra Melech El Chei Olamim.
Page 150. Whoa! Come on, quick!
Does this make a minion?
Page 148.
Does this make a minion?
This makes our minion. Well, I mean, assuming that the one person on line is actually paying attention, we're just going to assume that person is paying attention.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yikadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah B'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael B'galav v'zman kori v'imru Amen Yehei shmei rabbah mavarach le'olam u'mei amayah Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yiparer v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shemei dekudesho richu La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata damiran b'yalma v'imru Amen. Page 149. Baruchu et Adonai ha'mavorach Baruch Adonai ha'mavorach le'olam va'ed. Please be seated. Page 150. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Yotzer Or Uvorei Choshech Oseh Shalom Uvorei Et Hakol Hakol Yoducha V'Hakol Yishabchucha Hakol Yomerin Kadosh Kadonai Hakol Yomerin Chesel Yotzer Hakol V'Yel HaPeteh V'Taveh. Bottom of the page. In ki erkecha v'en zulatecha efes biltecha umidam elach. In ki erkecha v'en zulatecha efes biltecha umidam elach. In ki erkecha ba'olam hazeh v'en zulatecha v'chayei olam haba. Efes biltecha limot HaMashiach v'ein do melech litchiyat hametim El Adon al kol hamasim baruch u'barach b'fi kol neshama gadlo v'tuvo malei olam da'at u'tvuna sovevimoto Hamid Ga'el Hayot HaKodesh V'nedar B'chavot Al HaMerchava Zechut U'mishor Lifnei Kiso Chesed V'rachamim Lifnei Kavodo Tovim Ma'orot Shabara Eloheinu Yitzara B'da'at B'vina U'paskel Koach U'gvura Natan Bahem Liyod Moshlim B'kerev Tevel Maleim Ziv U'mefikim Noga Na'eziv U'mbechol ha'olam Semechim B'tzeitam V'sasim B'voam Osim Be'ema Ritzon Konam Pe'er V'chavod Nodnim Lishmot Sahala Varina L'zecher Malchuto Kara L'shemesh Vayizrach Or Ra'a V'hikin Surat Halvana Shevach Nodnim Lo Kol Tzivah Maharam Tiferet Gedula Serafim V'ofanim V'chayot HaKodesh Lai 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 Page 152. La'el asher shavat mikol hamasim b'yom hashvi'i ta'alav yeshavah k'sekedot tiveratoda. Amna korol yom ha'shabbat zeshem yom hashvi'i shabbat shabbat yom mikol tov yom hashvi'i mishabek v'yom mismor shir liyom ha'shabbat tov hodot Adonai lefichach yiforu yivorhu v'chol yitzurav shalach v'kol yidula yitim v'lomach There's b'yom Shabbat Kodesh Shimcha Adonai Eloheinu Yitgadel v'zichrecha malkeinu Yitpa'er b'shamayim mi'al v'ha'aretz mitachas. Page 153. Titbarak Tzureinu Malkeinu v'Goaleinu Borei Kodeshim Yishtabach Shemhu v'Cholel Hashem Asher Tov Kulam Amdim Barum Olam V'Mashmi'im B'Yirah Yachid B'Kol Kulam Ahuvim Kulam Barurim Kulam Giborim V'Kulam Osim Be'ema U'Yirah Ratzon Konam V'Kulam Potchim Et Pihem B'Kedusha U'V'Tahara B'Shira U'V'Zimra U'Mavarchim U'Mashabchim U'Mafarim U'Maritzim U'Makdishim U'Mamlichim Et Shem Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol HaGibor V'Hanara Kadoshu V'Kulam Mekablim Alehem O Malchut Shamayim Zemizeh Kulam Mekablim Alehem O Malchut Shamayim Zemizeh Kulam Mekablim Alehem O Malchut Shamayim Zemizeh Kulam Mekablim Alehem O Malchut Shamayim Zemizeh V'nodnim Rishut Zelazeh Lahakdish Liyotzram B'nachad Ruach B'safa Berura Uvinima Kedosha Kulam Ke'echad Onim V'yomrim B'yirah Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzvaot Ha'aretz Kevodo B'ha'ofanim V'chayot HaKodesh Bera'ash Gadol Mitnasim Liyumat Serafim L'umatam Meshabchim V'yomrim Baruch Kavod Adonai Nimkomo La'el Baruch Nimot Yitenu L'mel V'chai B'kayam Zmirah Yimim Kishkosh V'chivu L'vado Poel L'vurot Osech Hadashot Bal Milchamot Zareyat Tzedakot Matzmiach Yeshuot Barei Refuot Norah Tehilot Adon Haniflaot Hamachadesh B'tuvo B'chol Yom Tamid Maaseh Bereshit Ka'amur Liosei Orim Gedolim Ki Leolam Chasto Or Chadash Al Sion Tahir V'nizkeh Kulanu Mehera Lioro Baruch Ata Adonai Yotzer Hamaoro. Page 154. Are any of the people who came in later wanting me to put on my mask? Okay. Ahava Rabba Ahavtanu Adonai Eloheinu Chemla Gedola V'Teira Chamalta Aleinu Avinu Malkeinu Bavur Avotenu V'Imotenu Shebatchu Becha Avinu Malkeinu V'Telamdem Chukei Chaim Kein Techanenu Utlamdenu Avinu Ha'av Harachaman Hamrachem Rachem Aleinu V'tein B'libenu Lahavin Ul Haskil Lishmoa Lilmod Ulilamed Lishmor V'lasod Ulakayem Et Kol Divrei Talmud Torotecha B'Ahava V'ha'er Einenu B'Toratecha V'dabek Libenu B'mitzvotecha V'yachid Levavenu Li'ahava U'lira Et Shemecha V'lo Nevosh Li'olam Va'ed V'lo Nevosh Le'olam Va'ed Ki B'Shem Kodshecha Hagadol V'Hanora B'Tachnu Nagila Nagila v'nismecha b'shuatecha. V'havienu l'shalom me'arba kanfod haaretz v'tolichenu komemiyut liartzenu ki el po el yeshuotata uvanu v'charta mikolam v'lashon v'keiravtanu l'shimcha hagadol sela be'emet lahodot lecha uliyachedcha b'ahava Baruch atah Adonai habocher be'amo Yisrael b'ahava. Page 155. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadavarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivchecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha b'derech uv'shachbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu l'totafot b'neinecha uktavtam al mezut beitecha uv'isharecha. Continue silently. Yishamru lachem pen yiftal avachem v'yasartem v'yaptem v'yimachrim yishtem v'chara af Adonai bachem v'yatzar shemayim v'yimator v'yamor v'tetem yibala v'yavadtem v'heiram v'yam ha'oretz v'harashem v'yam avachem v'yam avshetem v'shartem otayetchem v'hayu v'totafot b'neihem v'limantem otam et b'neichem l'daber bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha u'lechtecha b'derech v'shachbar v'kumecha tavtam al mezuzot beitecha v'yisharecha L'man yirbu yemechem v'yemei b'neichem al ha'adamah asher nishba Adonai l'avotechem l'teit l'chem b'yimei hashamayim ha'aretz Vayomer Adonai al Moshe lemor daber al b'nei Yisrael v'yamarta alehem v'yahu lehem tzitzit al kanfei bigdeihem l'norotam v'notnu al tzitzit hakanaf b'til techelet v'yahu lechem l'tzitzit v'ritem otam v'sfartem et kol mitzvot Adonai v'yasitem otam lo taturu acharei l'vavchem V'yachareinichem asher etem zinim v'man tizkuru v'yasitem et kol mitzvot v'yitem kikushim v'hifim Ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti esem me'eretz Yisrael Adonai Elohechem emet v'yatziv v'nachon v'kayam v'yishor v'ne'elam yehu v'chaviv v'nechon Lidor Vador, page 157. Lidor Vador hu kayam ushmo kayam v'chisonachon u'malchuto v'emunato la'ad kayamet drei chayim kayamim namim nechbabim l'ado v'me'olim al abotenu v'imotenu v'yolenu al banenu v'al dorotenu v'al kol dorot zera Yisrael avadecha al harishonim v'hal achronim davar tov v'kayam li'olam va'ed emet v'yemunachok lo yavor emet shatohu Adonai Eloheinu v'lohei avotenu v'imotenu malkeinu melech avotenu v'imotenu go aleinu go el avotenu v'imotenu yotzreinu tzur yeshuotenu podenu umatzilenu me'olam shemecha ein Elohim zulatecha Ezrat avotenu v'imotenu atohu me'olam magen yishenu livnehem achareim chol dor v'dor b'um olam moshavech tziklav se'eretz ashrei isha yishma le'mitzvotecha v'toratcha dvarcham yasima libo emet atohu adon li'amecha u'melech gibor la'riv rivam emet 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 atohu rishon emet 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 atohu acharon umibaladecha ein lanu melech melech goel u'moshiach ומבלעדיך אין לנו מלך, מלך גואל ומושיע. Page 158. ממצרים גאלתנו מן אלוהינו בביתו ובתים בביתנו כל בחוריהם הרעת כל בגאלת ים סוף וקטה וזיתנו. וחסו מים שריכם אחד להעשות שפחו אהובים במרמדביהם ונביאים גיטים זמרות שפחות ברכות. רם ונישא גדול ונורא, משפיל גאים ומגביה שפלים, מוציא אסירים ופודה ענבים ועוזר דלים. ועונה ליעמו בעת שבם אליו. תהילות לאל עליון, תהילות לאל עליון, ברוך הוא ומבורך. משה ומרים ובני ישראל, משה ומרים ובני ישראל, לך אנו שירה. בשמחה רבה, ויאמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות עושה פלא. שירה חדשה, שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. Please stand, Sur Yisrael, כולם בעזרת ישראל, ובני יהודה וישראל, גואלנו מנעץ ראשנו, כגדול ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, Yisrael. Page 159. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, El Gadol, Gibor HaNorah, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Gomel HaKol, V'Zocher Chesed Kol V'Imamo, U'Levi Yoreh V'Leinehem, V'Man Shemo V'Yahara, Melech Zerah Baruch atah Adonai, Magel Ha'am V'Okei Sarah, Atah Gibor Olam Adonai, Mechayeh Metim HaTorah V'Hoshia, Mashiach HaRuach U'Marih HaGashem, Mechapeh Hayim B'Chesed, Mechayeh Metim B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rafeh Cholim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mechayeh Me'emunato L'Shenei Afar, Michamocha V'Adonurot, U'Midom Elach, Melech Le'nit U'Mechayeh, U'Matzliach Yeshua, Ne'eman Atal HaChayot Metim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh HaMetim.
Amen. Milevishim Shabbat Kashem, Shabbat Shimon Mishmem Avrom, Kakatur Yadliach Hakar Zeh, Zeh, Yamar.
קדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Melech Tzvaot. אז בקורש כדודי וחזק משמינקו, וננסים ומצרוקים, תברוכים אלו.
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ צבאותו. אז בקול רעש גדול, אדיר וחזק, משמיעים קול, מתנסים לי מצורפים, תרומתם ברוך יאמרו.
ותמלוך עליך בכי מלאכו
Baruch Kavod Adonai Minkomo Minkomcha Malkeinu Tofia V'timloch Aleinu Ki Machakim Anachnu La Matai Timloch B'Tzion V'karov B'Yomeinu Li'olam Va'ed Tishkon Tikadal V'Tikadash B'Tok Yerushalayim Yircha L'dor V'dor U'Netzach Netzakim Ve'einu Tirecha Malchutecha Al Yedei David Mashiach Tzidkecha Loch Adonai Leolam Elohayich Tzion L'dor Vador Hallelujah L'dor Vador Nagigod Lecha U'Lenetzach Netzachim Kedushatcha Natish V'Shivchacha Eloheinu Mipinu Lo Yamush Leolam Va'ed Ki El Melech Gadol V'Kadosh Ata Baruch Ata Adonai El HaKadosh
Amen. לכן כתוב את שם.
Kaddish Shalem, page 167. Kadavi Kadash Shemei Rabbah B'yomah Divrachi Ritei V'yamlicha Chutei B'chayechonu V'mechonu V'chayel Al Beit Yisrael B'galav V'zman Kariv V'yimru Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah M'varach L'lam U'mei Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitparer v'yitraman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesho la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbchata v'nechamata damiran v'yomar v'yimru amen titkabel tzalaton avoton d'chol Yisrael katan avuhon dibishmaya v'yimru amen Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru amen Oseh shalom b'mermov hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yal kol yoshvei tevel v'yimru amen.
So Lois is here. There's one my brain suddenly switched on in the middle of shock read, and I realized that we're not supposed to even have the prayer leader taking off her mask. So I apologize for that. Good Shabbos, everyone. It's wonderful to have everybody here. Before we get started with the Torah Service, I just want to put into your brains thinking about the future. And I see that at this point in the service, we have 0 people looking at the YouTube feed, which I'm going to take as really good news, meaning that most people are here. But just to sort of have in your head as we go through the rest of Shabbat Service today, please be in contact with me about whether we need the ongoing YouTube access, and if we can more quickly than we originally thought think about moving back to a weekly rhythm, and if people are willing to make that commitment. So just something to think about as we enjoy it out. Okay, so in this book, page
68.
168, and the other book, page 54. Thank you.
Ein kamocha, v'Elohim Adonai, v'ein k'ma'asecha, malachutecha malachut kol olamim, u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imloch le'olam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yevarech et amo v'shalom, harachamim heitiv v'vertzonecha et Zion, tivneh chomot Yerushalayim, tivneh chomot Yerushalayim, ki bechol levad batachnu, melech eram benisa Adonai. Vayehi b'imso Aharon, vayomer Moshe, K'mo Adonai, ve'afutzu oilecha, ve'yanusu misanecha, mipanecha, ki Tzion tetzei Torah, ki Tzion tetzei Torah, u'devar Adonai Yerushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah, Baruch shenatan Torah, li'amo Yisrael, v'idushato. Page 170.
Page 56.
Dayan arachetz, ולשמי קדישה יקירה, אנא אמרתו שפכן, בינור רחץ, ולשמי קדישה יקירה, אנא אמרתו שפכן, יהי רבה קדמך, ותפתח ליבי ליאורייתא, ותשלים משאלי דליבי, וליבדך עמך ישראל, לטוב ולחיים ולשלום. Somebody help me with the Torah.
We'll take the red Torah.
Page 171. Oops, careful.
Oh, I'm more dangerous than the course.
Wait a minute. Are we still hooked up here? Or? Yeah. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Adonai iti, uneromima Shemo Yadav. Adonai, Hagedula, Hagelura, Hatiferet, Vehanetzach, Vehahod, Ki chol hashamayim u'aretz, Lecha Adonai, Hamamlacha, Haminaseh, Lecha lerosh, Romemu, Romemu, Adonai Eloheinu, V'yishtachavu, V'yishtachavu, Le'Adonai Kadoshu. Romemu, Romemu, Adonai Eloheinu, V'yishtachavu, V'yishtachavu, Le'Adonai
Okay. I don't know if this is rolled, so we'll have to have a look. Great. Oh, good. Maury, I'll take that one. Thanks.
Oh, this is a clumsy scroll.
Shabbat Shalom. So today's portion is Vayetzei. The entire portion is Genesis 28:10 through 32:3. We're reading the final third, which starts at 31:17, goes through the end of the chapter. The portion as a whole starts on 166. We're starting our reading on 181. 181.
You need a hand or you good? It's one of these right in the middle of each line.
I just had it. It's down the last line.
Here's the beginning of the Vayetzei, so it must be that.
Oh. Where, I don't see Vayishlach.
And Vayetzei is right here.
Okay.
So it
But I
must-
just had Yaakov, and it was down. Maybe I had the wrong line. My eye may have slipped.
Vayishma et divrei b'nei Lavan.
That's not where it starts.
Oh, I thought he said page 80. Page
It starts by Yaakov on the triennial cycle, and the whole thing
Got it.
has no paragraph breaks.
Right.
So please just give me a minute. Okay, that's the different song. Yes.
Not the easiest thing to find. Vayetzei v'yagem v'yashir l'chol chosi bo v'nomar amen.
Amen.
Ha'kol hobo kodei v'eloheinu nu kavod l'Torah ta'amod ilana b'ki haskell v'tova kohen Baruch shenatan Torah li'amo Yisrael b'kedushato.
Vatem hadikim b'Adonai Elohim hayim bohem hayom.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch le'olam va'ed.
Adonai barak le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayakom Yaakov Vayisa et banav et nashav al hagamalim vanaheg et kol vayinhag et kol miknehu et kol rakusho asher rachash miknei kinyano asher rachash b'fadan aram lavo el yatak aviv artakanan V'lavan halak ligzos et zono. V'tignov Rachel et terapim asher la'aviha. V'yignov Yaakov et lev Lavan harami. Al bali lo ki v'reachu. Vayivrahu v'kol asher lo vayakom vayavor et hanahar vayisa et panav har hagilad.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Jim? Ya'amod Chaim Yaakov ben
Simcha v'Batya Halevi.
Simcha v'Batya Halevi.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Vayugad Lavan Vayom Hashlishi Ki Barach Yaakov Vayikach Et Achav Imo Vayirdof Acharav Derek Shivat Yamim Vayadbek Oto Bahar Gilad Vayavo Elohim Elavan Ha'arami Bachalom Halayla Vayomer lo Hishamer lecha Pen tedaber im Yaakov mitov ad ra.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Earth, can I call you? Ya'amod Yitzchak ben Avraham v'Zizel Shlishi.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Borach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Adonai Borach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Vayetzei Lavan et Yaakov v'Yaakov taka et oholo bahar v'Lavan taka et echav bahar Gilad vayomer Lavan v'Yaakov ve'asita v'tignovot et levavi v'tenaheg et benotai kishvuyot karev. Lama nachbeta libroach v'tignovoti v'lo higadata li v'ashalekaka v'simcha uvshirim v'tofuchinor v'lo natashtani l'nashek livanai v'linotai ata hiskalta aso yesh la'el yadi la'asot imachem ra Ve'lohei avichem emesh amar elai lemor hishamer lecha v'daber im Yaakov mitov ad ra v'ata halo halakta ki niksafta leveit avicha lama ganafta et Elohai. Vaya'an Yaakov vayomer lelavan ki areti ki amarti pen tigzol et benotecha me'imi im asher hikseh
Timsa.
tiksa timseh et Elohecha lo yikyeh neged achenu haker lecha ma'imadi v'kachlach v'lo yada Yaakov ki Rachel ganavatam vayavo Lavan v'ohel Yaakov uva ohel Leah uva ohel shtei ha'amahot V'lo matzah Vayetzei me'ohel Leah Vayavo v'ohel Rachel V'Rachel lakaha et haterafim V'tesimein b'char hagamal V'teshev alehem וימשש לבן את כל האוהל ולא מצא. ותאמר אל אביה, אל ייחר בעיני אדוני, היא לא אוהה לקום מפניך, כי דרך נשים לי, ויחפש ולא מצא את התרפים.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן.
Lauren? Yamod Lev ben Abraham Baruch Rivi'i.
You dismissed him.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah. Amen.
Amen. ויחר ליעקב וירד בלבן ויען יעקב ויאמר ללבן מה פשעי מה חטאתי כי דלקת אחריי אם הששת את כל כלי מה מצאת מכל כלי ביתך שמחו נגד אחי ואחיך ויוכיחו בין שנינו זה 20 שנה אנוכי עמך רחילך ועזך לא שיקלו ואלי צאנך לא אכלתי טרפה לא הבאתי אליך אנוכי אקטק שנה אחת שנה וידי אחתנה אנוכי אחתנה מידי תבקשנה גנובתי יום וגנובתי לילה והייתי ביום אכלני הורב וקרח בלילה ותדע שנתי מעיניי זה לי 20 שנה בביתך עבדתיך 14 שנה בשתי בנותיך ו6 שנים בצונך ותקלף את משכורתי 10 מונים לולא אלוהי אבי אלוהי אברהם ופחד יצחק היה לי כי אתה ריקם שלחתני את עוני ואת יגיע כפיי ראה אלוהים ויוקם אש.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Andrea? Talmud Ruth Bat Abraham Basara Chamishi. We're at verse 43 on page 185.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayan Lavan Vayomer El Yaakov Habanor B'notai v'habanim Banai v'tzon soni L'chol asher ataro Elihu V'libnotai ma'aseh Elah hayom Olibnehen asher yaladu V'ata lecha Vikratav rit ani v'ata V'haya la'ed b'ni u'beinecha V'yikach Yaakov aven V'yrimeha matzeva.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayei olam nata b'Eloheinu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Sylvia? Sue, can I call you? Ta'amol, Shoshana Bat, Moshe, Ben Nachama, Shishi.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayomer Yaakov le'halitu avanim vayichu avanim vayasu gal vayochlu sham al hagal vayikra lo Lavan yagar sahaduta v'Yaakov kara lo gal'ed vayomer Lavan hagal hazeh Eid beini u'beinecha hayom al kain kara shemo gal'ed v'hamitzpah sher amar yitzef Adonai beini u'beinecha hinisa teher ish ish merehu Im ta'anet b'notai v'emtikach nashim al b'notai ein ish imanu re'eh Elohim eid beini u'beinecha.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tzachenu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Petra? Ta'amol, Ruth bar Abraham v'Sara, Shvi'i.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'nu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayomer Lavan leYaakov, Hine hagal hazeh v'hine hamatzeva asher
Yariti.
Yariti b'ni u'beinecha et hagal hazeh v'eda hamatzeva imani lo evor elecha et hagal hazeh v'mata lo ta'avor elai et hagal hazeh v'et hamatzeva hazot l'ra'ah Elohei Abraham v'Elohei Nahor yishbetu v'neinu Elohei Avihem Vayishaba Yaakov b'fakad aviv Yitzhak Vayizbach Yaakov zevek bahar Vayikra le'echav le'echol lachem Vayochlu lechem vayalinu bahar Vayashkem Lavan baboker Shake levanav livnotav vayavorech ethem vayelech vayashov Lavan limkomo v'Yaakov halach l'darko vayifga'u bo malachei Elohim vayomer Yaakov kasher ra'am Machanei Elohim zeh vayikra shem hamakom hahu Makanai.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
At this point in the service, we do a mishabarak for those who are ill. If you'd like to mention someone's name, please stand up so I can call on you. Otherwise, Mishabarak Rabbeinu Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov B'nitenu Sar Rivka Rachel V'Leah V'yivarech V'yirapeh et kol hacholim.
Tamar Miriam Moshe Ben Yitzhak.
Nozeti and Nehemiah.
Edi bat Sarah, Sarah bat Abigail, Ilan ben Vered, Amy bat Rivka, Jean bat Hayedel, Jane, Nikki, and Jerry.
I know.
David Cohen, Nikolai Koshi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Aleichem V'Hachilimam V'Rapitam V'Hakizimkam V'Hakilotam Bishlach Lehem Mehera Rufua Shlema Min HaShemayim Rufuat HaNefesh Rufuat HaGuf B'toch Sha'ar Cholei Yisrael V'Namar Amen.
Amen.
May the one who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bring blessing and healing to all those who we have named who are ill. May the Holy Blessed One may have mercy upon them and speedily restore them to perfect health, both in body and spirit, together with all others who are ill. And let us say, Amen. Steve. We have the maftir.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Nan, would you like to do the maftir?
Can we
No.
switch this?
Just look at this Torah. You're telling me to waste Steve on a maftir?
I didn't live the Torah.
Okay, Steve, would you like the maftir?
I completely understand. If I weren't here, I would never sit here.
Ya'amod.
Shul ben Yeshai Gadai.
Shul ben Yeshua v'Gadaya, maftir. The maftir is on page 187, the beginning of chapter 32.
Baruchu et Adonai HaMbarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam
Baruch Adonai HaMbarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayashem Lavan b'boker. Vaynashek lebanav libnotav vayavorek ehem. Vayelech vayashav Lavan b'mkomo. V'Yaakov halach l'darko. Vayiftu bo malachei Elohim. Vayomer Yaakov kasher ra'am machanei Elohim zeh. Vayikra Shem HaMakom Hahu Malkanayim.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'hayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
And Harvey, would you be allowed to do rap?
Go up.
Do some much away from the
Yeah.
towers. Yamdu Hagmanpia Bahagolel.
All set, Harvey? And Mark, the other one?
Frozen shoulders.
Yeah, exactly.
This one. There we go. All right.
V'zo HaTorah Asher Samoshe Lifnei Yisrael Yad Adonai Yad Moshe
Morashav Kevilat Yaakov, Morashav Kevilat Yaakov, Morashav Kevilat Yaakov, Torah Siva Lanu Moshe, Torah, 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 Siva Lanu Moshe, Torah, 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 Siva Lanu Moshe, Torah, I realized I put the wrong covers on the Torahs, so I'll have to switch them back afterwards. I guess my color blindness was going on this morning. Couldn't tell the difference between red and blue.
Ah,
What's wrong? What's the problem?
I think the blue cover was on the one with the blue winkle, and so when I switched from the white ones this morning, and I think I put the wrong cover on the wrong one, but we'll fix it.
This is the one that's usually the
This is the one that's usually blue. Yes.
that's why it felt so heavy, Karen.
Sorry.
So the Haftorah today is found on page 189. It's Hosea 12:13 through 14:10. Please join Steve in the blessings, which are found on page 66.
Feel free to join me with the prayer before and after. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar mitovim v'rasav b'neihem hanori be'emet Baruch atah Adonai haofer b'Torah u'Moshe abdo Yisrael amo u'v'niyeh v'asedek. Then Jacob had to flee to the land of Aram. There Israel served for a wife. For a wife he had to guard sheep. When the Lord brought Israel up from Egypt, it was through a prophet. Through a prophet they were guarded. Ephraim gave bitter offense, and his Lord cast his crimes upon him, and he requited him for his mockery. When Ephraim spoke piety, he was exalted in Israel, but he incurred guilt through Baal, and so he died. And now they go on sinning. They have made them molten images, idols by their skill, from their silver, wholly the work of craftsmen. Yet for these they appoint men to sacrifice. They are wont to kiss calves. Assuredly, they shall be like morning clouds, like dews so early gone, like chaff whirled away from the threshing floor, and like smoke from a lattice. Only I, the Lord, have been your God. Ever since the land of Egypt, you have never known a true God but me. You have never had a helper other than me. I looked after you in the desert, in a thirsty land. When they grazed, they were sated. When they were sated, they grew haughty, and so they forgot me. So I am become like a lion to them. Like a leopard, I lurk on the way. Like a bear robbed of her young, I attack them, and rip open the casings of their hearts. I will devour them there like a lion. The beasts of the field shall mangle them. You are undone, O Israel. You have no help but me. Where now is your king? Let him save you. Where are the chieftains of all your towns from whom you demanded? Give me a king and officers. I give you kings in my ire, and take them away in my wrath. Ephraim's guilt is bound upon. His sin is stored away. Pangs of childbirth assail him, and the babe is not wise, for this is no time to survive, and the birth stool of babes. From Sheol itself I will save them, redeem them from very death. Where, O death, are your plagues, your pestilence? Where, O Sheol? Revenge shall be far from my thoughts, for though he flourished among reeds, a wind of the Lord shall come blowing up from the wilderness. His fountain shall be parched, his spring dried up. That wind shall plunder treasures, every lovely object. Samaria must bear her guilt, for she has defied her God. They shall fall from the sword, their infants shall be dashed to death, and their women with children ripped open. Return, O Israel, to the Lord your God, for you have fallen because of your sin. Take words with you and return to the Lord. Say to him, forgive all guilt and accept what is good. Instead of bulls we will pay the offerings of your lips. Assyria shall not save us, no more will we ride on steeds, nor ever again will we call our handiwork our God, since in you alone orphans find pity. I will heal their affliction. Generously will I take them back in love, for my anger is turned away from them. I will be to Israel like dew. He shall blossom like the lily. He shall strike root like a Lebanon tree. His boughs shall spread out far. His beauty shall be like the olive trees, his fragrance like that of Lebanon. They who sit in his shade shall be revived. They shall bring to life new grain. They shall blossom like the vine. His scent shall be like the wine of Lebanon. Ephraim shall say, what more have I to do with idols? When I respond and look to him, I become like a verdant cypress. Your fruit is provided by me. He who is wise will consider these words. He who is prudent will take note of them. For the path of the Lord are smooth. The righteous can walk on them, while sinners stumble on them. Ooh. Baruch atah Eloheinu melech haolam, sur kol hamim, tzadik b'chol ha'arot, ha'eh ha'ne'eman, ha'omer v'yoseh, ha'midbarer v'mekayem, shekol devarav v'tzedek, v'ne'eman atahu Adonai v'ne'emarim devarecha, v'davarecha devarecha, ahor v'shuvrecha, Baruch atah Adonai, ha'eh ha'ne'eman b'chol devarav. Rachem al Tzion ki b'chayenu, v'la'u nefesh l'shia b'mheira b'yameinu. Baruch atah Adonai, nisamech Tzion levanecha. Sameinu Adonai Eloheinu, ve'elcha b'yadecha. Malchut b'David Mashiachecha, b'mheira yavo v'yameh b'meinu. Al kislo v'lo yeshem zah, v'lo yimachol elohim et kevodo. Ki v'shem kadshem ha'nishbat ha'lo, shelo yimechel olam va'ed. Baruch atah Magen David. Al ha'torah v'al v'yom ha'shabbat hazeh, shenatan lanu Adonai Eloheinu, l'kedusha u'lemenucha, l'kavod u'tifaret. Al ha'kol Adonai Eloheinu, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך, יתברך שמך כל חי, תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. אמן.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So today's portion, we learn about Rachel's very covert theft of the family idols. This is, I think, one of the most disquieting parts of Genesis for me, in that, we know that our patriarchs and matriarchs are not necessarily paragons of virtue in everything that they do. While certainly the arc of their characters tends to be one toward good, there's certainly no shortage of examples of how not to behave within Genesis. Certainly the theft of the idols is not one, it's unmatched by the many actions of Jacob's sons, whether it's attempted murder or actual murder. And certainly Lot and his daughters would be a relative low point for our ancestors, or the ancestors of those peoples nearest to us. But I think that for me, Rachel's theft of the idols stings in particular because I have difficulty understanding the motivation, at least in a text where we as Jews learn to have a very direct relationship with one God, and to be apart from idols as something that is just categorically wrong from a theological standpoint. Rachel's theft of the idols in particular, not simply money or an inheritance, really rankles. But then again, in review of many of our kind of later patriarchs, Rachel is certainly not the one who, I think, within the text of the Tanakh, has kind of does the worst thing with idols, in fact. Hers is the theft of idols, whereas Aaron, who is far more of an intimate to God than Rachel is within our text, is the creator, in some ways, of the golden calf himself, a far greater transgression. Likewise, Solomon, although he is certainly perhaps even more so one of God's intimates, and we're told very wise in word and deed, manages to, at the same time that he has this deep relationship with God, worship the Astaroth at the same time. So her mere theft of the idols is not even the most disquieting episode of idolatry within the Tanakh. So from that standpoint, I really wanted to understand a little bit more why she did this. Certainly, from just the bare bones of the text and the psychology of the individual characters, we see Rachel as not as a matriarch who has very little individual agency. Sarah, while she's not an intimate of God on the level that Abraham is, she is still somebody who takes a lot of agency and kind of walks among the angels quite literally, and is a very formative figure in her dealings with her husband and within her household. Likewise, Rebecca takes this to an even greater degree. While she's not, I would say, sort of spiritually engaged in the way that Sarah is, as someone who is really directly relating to God, she's certainly a woman who does not lack for agency within her household. Leah, of our four main matriarchs, is certainly largely silent within the text, but we can read into it that she at least had some role in the subterfuge that Laban had with Jacob. It would be very hard for her to stand in silently to the arranged marriage that Jacob has. It's Rachel who's kind of used as a bartering piece. And in some ways, this is the one small act of agency she has within the story. Now again, it's still, kind of taking these idols, preferring these idols, and it's an act that still, I think, chafes even with that understanding. So for our rabbinic commentators, Rashi actually draws a parallel to Rachel's actions with later Midrash about Abraham and his father. This being the famous story about where Abraham's father, in possession of a number of idols, Abraham surreptitiously smashes all the idols and gives a story about how one idol managed to annoy another idol. They came to words and smashed each other, to which his father replies, well, they're made of wood and stone, they can't do that. To which Abraham asks, why then do you worship them? So in Rashi's eye, Rachel steals these idols not simply because they are monetarily valuable, but in that she sees Laban as being drawn astray by idol worship, and that by removing these household gods from his possession, he will then somehow be drawn away, not unlike Abraham and his father. Similarly, or to take a medieval spin, both Ramban and even Ezra do sort of posit that these idols are false gods, but not that they are totally without use. In their eyes, Laban's success and his material wealth comes from the fact that these idols, in their eyes, were kind of a locus for astrology, that there was maybe no gods behind them, but that Laban could kind of predict the cycles of the seasons and basically had some sort of power through the idols, even though it wasn't a godly one, so to speak. So I think within that context, it's a little bit easier to understand this action as one that is not wholly selfish, and it's one that we'll see another echo of later in Exodus as the children of Israel leave Egypt and basically fleece their neighbors in the process. Rachel is, in a sense, stealing what she feels could be her inheritance. Again, it'd be a little bit easier for us to, I think, sympathize with if it were simply the family silverware. So along those lines, I wanted to ask, why do you think Rachel does this?
Well, the text, as you point out, is pretty skimpy on the subject. But in terms of what little we know of Rachel, we know that before Jacob implements his plan to leave, he consults his wives. And that's not so usual in Torah for women to have a voice. And the text says Rachel and Leah, putting Rachel first. So it sounds like she's the moving party, as between the two wives, says, do what God has told you. Which has, maybe, you could interpret it as meaning that as was customary, wives took the religion of their husbands. And these wives have seen the way Jacob has prospered. So they have some reason to have confidence that his God is in fact a true God. So maybe she does want to interfere with her father's idol worship. She certainly doesn't treat them respectfully. She puts them in this pouch and sits on them. You don't do that with a God. So whatever else she's doing, I don't think she values them.
Any other thoughts?
I think that the story is meant to show that they are humiliating Laban. That Laban, as you mentioned, sees his power being enhanced by the possession of these gods, these Traphim. They're very important to him. And basically, she's getting back at him in that way. So I think that's really, and the context of the story is to kind of poke fun at him, to show that he, and also to give him an excuse, perhaps, to be really furious, which then heightens the drama of the story. But I'd like to point out that Jacob says to Laban, whoever has these Traphim, I don't know anything about it, whoever has them, may that person be put to death. And it is Rachel who very sadly dies early on the road back, never gets to Canaan. And it's a tragedy that hangs over Jacob for the rest of his life, as he talks about it at the very end of his life. So I think that there's a certain a tragic element to the fact that she's done this in the story.
Very much so.
So your presentation here really sparked kind of a new understanding of how this fits into the story in terms of the sequencing. Because in chapter 31, verse 14, when Rachel and Leah are consulted, they say, "Do we still have a share in the inheritance of our father's house? Surely he regards us as outsiders. Now that he has sold us and has used up our purchase price, truly all the wealth of God was taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children." So I think what she's doing in this case is she's acting on this principle that actually all of whatever wealth there is represents them, and it's actually a theft of Laban of their rival. And so she's just taking action.
Now, in any way, would, from Laban's perspective, certainly not saying it's a good one, would he have seen Jacob's labors for him for 20 years to have been that very price? Are they entitled to that dowry that they might otherwise have if this were a less negotiated marriage?
I mean, it would be interesting to fantasize that Rachel somehow was going to use these to negotiate, but, you know, that's just a fantasy or a mirage.
The other perspective is that we all, or at least in our generation, we tended to take the china of our parents and grandparents, even if we don't plan on using it very often. And this might just be a nostalgia. I mean, this is a piece of home, and she has to leave, and they're objects, and they don't deserve quite high levels of respect because they're not gods, but they're still what it was like to be growing up in that house. And in that sense, it really is a theft.
She's taking it for herself, and she pays the price for it. It's not a great thing. In that sense.
Do you think it was, what do you think the image of the idol was? Do you think it was a fertility goddess? And I'm just wondering what it was.
Yeah.
And it says in the text she said she had her period when she was sitting on it. And Rachel has this history of not being able to conceive and have babies, and it's difficult, and she dies, and I think it fits together in some kind of way for me. I don't know.
I think in many ways for the modern reader, it's hard not to come up with some mental image of what these idols must have looked like. Certainly the touchstone I personally use is that of, there are a number of very ancient figurines known as the Venus of so and such place that they were found, and these are typically fertility, we think, fertility idols, although again there are some scholars who think they might actually be children's toys that we're just kind of retrojecting this on. So I think that it's important to understand that the term that many scholars use to describe the religious perspective that the Israelites would have had for both the time that this story would take place and for the majority of the Tanakh was not one necessarily of strict monotheism, but of this idea of henotheism, that there might actually be multiple gods, so to speak. Certainly Hashem is the God, par excellence, the greatest God perhaps, but not necessarily the only kind of divine being that governed day-to-day life. And this idea of, in many ways, very personal gods was one that I think was alive and very well. We can see, I think, a hint of that in the very end of today's triennial cycle portion, where I believe Laban refers to, and they swear by, the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor. So again, certainly I think there's a lot of plasticity in terms of what God, is respected by whom and just where those boundaries are. But the idea that there might be still some personal power to these idols is very much there.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you brought this topic today, and I noticed as we were doing the reading, as Mary was reading this comment in to verse 30, why did you steal my gods? When Jews imitate the religious practices of their neighbors, the neighbors may not be flattered. They may resent seeing things that are sacred to them being used in a non-religious manner. I'm not sure I entirely understood that, but I do. But it did strike me a little bit along the lines of what Maury was saying, where for people who have, like me, who've made converted from one religion to the next, there's always sort of the question of, well, what do you bring along with you from your previous practices, and what of those are sort of kosher to bring along, and what are the things that are not kosher to bring along? And of course, the last thing you want to do is disrespect them, which Rachel does here seem to do, at least implicitly. Although it might be that was not meant as disrespect, but just self-protection. Like she had heard Jacob's imprecation against the person who had stolen these things, and so no way am I going to let it be known that it was me. But it does raise that question of what is when you're crossing over boundaries, and this is a story, right, where Jacob is crossing a boundary from being in Mesopotamia where we're on to going into the new place. What do you bring with you, and what do you leave behind?
Any other thoughts?
I think, like Sylvia, I think that Rachel did very well in hedging bets about the possibility of using the force of these guys. After all, I don't think we have to expect that she was fully committed to the transmission of the monotheistic idea from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, and she may have been seizing upon this other well expressed concern in the neighborhood in the Middle East with other kinds of god powers, and that she was claiming these with the possibility that she might need them even to add to the strength of the transmission from Abraham to Isaac.
This is a story about, as it was said, transition and crossing back to
to boundaries from one place to another, from one culture and homeland to another. And it is a very, I don't know if the word is awkward, but it's a very, it's a story that is very fraught with difficulty. There's all kinds of problems that occur, and Jacob escapes within an inch of his life, really, out of there in the middle of the night, and he's pursued, and Lavan catches up with him. And this whole episode of the Trafim, which, as people have said, represents, are you still there, or are you in a new place, and what's left over when you go to a new place, that this whole thing heightens the tension and difficulty of the story. And one thing it does is provide Lavan with an opportunity to be really righteously indignant. And righteous indignation is Lavan's stock in trade.
I think very much so, and it would be hard to imagine, even as Lavan protests, that had they not stolen the idols, they would have gotten some sort of happy send-off instead. I think it just, again, adds a little insult to the injury that all of our parties have suffered, but heightens the tension of the episode considerably.
But we never hear anything more about what happens to these cherubim. You know, presumably they're still in that camel pouch, and they go with Rachel, and she dies on the way, and someone else unpacks that pouch someday. And what do they do with it?
Maybe it was where she buried her, who knows?
But I also see, in these chapters, is a continual thread which focuses on stealing. And there's an image that appears twice in chapter 31 about that literally translates Jacob stole the leg, the heart, the mind, the everything, and the understanding of this by those who are text scholars is that this was an image that meant keeping in the dark. But the actual literal meaning, as I read this before I read the scholarly interpretation of the image, was that it really is talking about Jacob stealing away with Laban's heart, with his heart and mind, which are his daughters and his grandchildren, and it also and so it's part of this whole thread of all of these steps that are going on. But I immediately, before I knew the real scholarly translation, immediately thought, well, this is really related. He's really talking about his family being here torn apart. And it also made me think of a comment that Francis Ganam made on one of my Divrei Torah on this portion, where Francis read this, and he had recently become a grandfather. And he said, I really sympathize with Laban. What, you're taking with my grandchildren?
I think Laban's perspective is one we're not want to take, but it's not hard to see him regarding this branch of his family as a total plague. First they come for Rebecca, and that's okay, and then they come for the rest of his daughters and his progeny. So it's understandable that he'd be aggrieved.
Thinking about Leah is really it's a major sin for the rabbis. It's really a no-no, and the fact that Jacob is that image is repeated over and over in relation to Jacob, lowers his stock, so to speak.
What was the major sin?
Getting out of Leah, this idea of keeping people in the dark, of stealing someone's heart, right? I think if I don't have my categories confused, which I might, one of the examples is when you go into a shop and you make a big deal of checking out all the Rolexes and figuring, and then you go to Amazon and buy it.
Yeah, but on the one hand, on a human level, you could really feel for Laban. He probably did not expect when he married off these daughters that Jacob was ever going to be able to leave. He didn't pay him enough for him to be able to leave. But think of Rebecca. She never got to see Jacob again either, as far as we know. The distances really interfered with family life. They didn't have cell phones. Remember? It's a very hard situation.
Long distance relationships are different.
the way the Parsha ends, the last we hear of God, he's kissing his children and grandchildren and blessing them, and then goes on his way. And the Vayetzei leaves out that little piece of it. It doesn't talk about him blessing them, which I think is a bit too much editorializing.
I think if anybody wants a topic to talk about for the Parsha next year, you might have just found it. Shalom.
Yeshua. All right. So this is page 73.
73? Oh, the state, prayer for the state of Israel. This one.
Rise is very old.
Please, God, bless the state of Israel, guard it with your abundant love, and spread over it the shelter of your peace. Send forth your light and your truth to its leaders and judges, to its representatives and to those who defend it. Strengthen them and guide them with good counsel through your presence,
so that they may walk in the way of justice,
freedom, and integrity. Give peace to the land and lasting joy to all its inhabitants, and let us say. And we do a prayer for the congregation, page 75. May the one who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and our mothers, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah,
bless all people of this congregation, and of all other congregations, them and all their dear ones. May God's blessings also be
vouchsafe unto those who dedicate and maintain synagogues,
unto those who enter their worship and studies, unto those who provide natural creation and wine to finish
unto those who provide bread for the wayfarer and tzedakah for the poor. May God also bless those who faithfully devote themselves to the needs of the community, to the dearly and embarrassed Israel. Holy One, blessed all sickness, preserve them in health, forgive their sins, prosper the work of their hands, bestow blessings upon them, along with all Israel, and brothers and sisters. Do we do a prayer for the country?
Sure.
Page 77. Our God and God of our fathers and mothers, we invoke thy blessing upon our country, and the government of this republic, the President of these United States, and all who exercise just and rightful authority. Do thou instruct them out of thy law, that they may administer all affairs of state, justice, and equity, that peace and security and happiness and prosperity, right and freedom, may forever about us. Unite all the entities of our country, whatever their origin and creed, into a bond of true kinship, to banish hatred and bigotry, to safeguard the ideals and free institutions of our country's glory. May this land, under thy providence, be an influence for good throughout the world, humanity and peace and freedom, and helping to fulfill the vision of thy prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all humanity, both great and small, shall know me. Page 84?
84, yes, 84.
Somebody,
and we need a Torah.
Torah helper here. Thank you, Lord. Why would you so much here?
Let me just get this up.
Yeah, hallelujah, Shem Adonai. King is God, Shema Levado, Odo Aleres, Vishomayim, Vayorem Keren Yamo, Tilalecho, Hasidam, Livnei Yisrael, Kerovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. ימים רבים, כל אדוני בכוח, כל אדוני בהדר, כל אדוני שובר ארזים, וישבר אדוני את ארזי, ויקידם כמו עגל, לבנון וסריון כמו בן רעמים, כל אדוני קצף לבקש, כל אדוני מדבר, יחמיר אדוני מדבר קדש, כל אדוני ויחשוף ירות, ובהיכלו כולו מהכבוד, אדוני עמהו ישב, ישב אדוני מלך לעולם, אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. ובנוחו יאמר, page 90, Shabbat Shalom, Safei Yisrael. Kohanech Yevushu Tzedek, Chasidech Yoreinu Ba'avud V'Mekadech Al Tishem. Ki lekach tov natati lachem, Torati al tazovu, Eitzvayim bi, Ramazim ba, V'tomcheha, Neushar, give them a choice here.
Yeah.
You gotta change masks.
Change masks.
I can't seem to.
Those I can't
I
imagine.
gotta adjust to this. I'm gonna take a survey. We could either do a very abbreviated Musaf or a fuller Musaf through the Kedusha together. Show of hands who wants to do the abbreviated Musaf. Just curious. Wait. And who wants to do more of a full Musaf? Okay, so I get the picture. No, I want to ask. I want to know what people want. So we'll do a somewhat abbreviated. I'll do the Kedusha, the half Kaddish before on page 92. We'll do the silent Amidah, and then we'll just finish up the service at the end. Okay, page 92. Yitgadal v'yitkadosh shemei rabba yamad yivrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayedecho be'Yisrael b'galo v'zman kariv yimaru amen v'hei shemei rabba mevarach v'yamam liyam v'yamaya Yiparach v'yishtabach, v'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitador v'yitala v'yitalal, shemei dekudashah, le'elah min kol berchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran b'yalama v'yimaru amen. Proceed silently. שים שלום, טובה וברכה בעולם, חן וחסד ורחמים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברכנו אבינו כולנו כי אחד ביור פניך. כי ביור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, תורת חיים ואהבת חסד, ואהבת חסד, וצדקה וברכה ורחמים וחיים ושלום, ורחמים וחיים וחיים ושלום. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך, את עמך ישראל, בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. יקדל ויקדש מרבה, ילמד יברח ילכי וימלך מלכותי, וחייכון וימלכון וחי לכל בישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב וימרו, אמן, וישמרה, לעלמא לעלמא, יתברך Shabbat v'po'ar v'troman v'naseh v'tadar v't'aleh v't'halal shemei dekudashah le'ela min kol v'chata v'shirata tishvachata v'nechemata da'amiran b'yama v'imeru tikal bal salotahon uva'atahon l'cho Yisrael Kadam avuhon divishma v'imeru Yehesh lamar ravamin shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru Oseh shalom b'imramo v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru Page 130 let's see. Let's do a Torah. Ein keloheinu, ein kadonenu, ein kemalkeinu, ein kemoshienu, micheloheinu, michadonenu, michemalkeinu, michemoshienu, no del Eloheinu, no del Adonenu, no del Malkeinu, no del Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shetiru, Avoteinu, Levo Necha Ketorecha Sami. Aleinu Shabbat Shalom Hakol. Aleinu Yosef Bereshit. Shalom Aleinu Rasul. Shalom Samanu. Shalom Adonai. Shalom Aleinu Kaven. Kakatu b'taratecha, Adonai imloch li'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, bayam hahu, yeh Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. Mourners, those saying Kaddish, may remain standing, and if anybody would like to call a name, they're welcome to. You don't have to, though. Okay. Page 136. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabah v'yalma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon u'v'yomechon v'chayei v'chol beit Yisrael v'agala u'v'zman kariv v'yimeru amen. Yehei shemei rabah v'barach v'yalam v'yomei omaya yit barach v'yishtabach v'yit pa'ar v'yit romam v'yit naseh v'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal shemei dekudsha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechemata da'amiram b'yama v'yimeru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Announcements.
Oh, well, week from tomorrow, on November 21st, is our next Schmooze and Learn on Zoom. John Sears, who has written a definitive book about this topic, is going to talk to us about Eleanor Roosevelt and the Jews.
Wow.
And I know I'm looking forward to that. Having read the book, And that's on the 21st at 7:30 on Zoom. The Hanukkah party that we're going to also have on Zoom on Thursday, November 2nd, is dramatically taking shape.
December 2nd, did you say?
December.
Yeah.
Thursday evening, December 2nd.
Yeah,
Did I
okay.
say 2nd?
You said November, but that's okay.
Yeah, December 2nd is dramatically taking shape. We have Paul Cosman telling us about newly understood facts about explain about Hanukkah. We have the premiere of an original music video for Hanukkah. We have storytelling by members of Dominion about their Hanukkah experiences and memories. And there's room for additional experiences and memories if any of you would like to come up with talk to Sherry. And so that's that. And then that's on the 2nd at 7:30. And on December 19th at the same time, 7:30, our book group is getting together to talk about the book Free Spirit by Joshua Safran.
Okay. Any other announcements? Laurie.
So we received permission to go into the tent for, I'm not sure if we have it today, because we didn't make an announcement, but I'm just preparing for the next time we meet, which is the Shabbos after Thanksgiving. I'd like to propose, I'm willing to bring 2 cars. If there are people who are planning on coming, I hope people come so we actually have them. I'm sure some people will be right. If people just do a potluck, Kiddush, try and bring things that are in packages better with the actual sharing space with our friends. We don't have to make them comfortable. And let's see if we can get started.
Yeah, good.
That would be great. And as I said earlier, to those of you who weren't here, I would love to begin thinking about moving to a weekly as opposed to every other week. There are going to be a fair number of challenges involved in that, not least of all that there is a fair amount of technology that is involved in there. So at some point we'll need to figure out some way of either doing it without the technology or training people, other people besides me, to manage it. But I want to sort of put into your heads that if you have ever contemplated learning to lay in Torah or to lead a service in worship and study, now is the time to really act on that. I'm sure Lois, certainly I, Sherry, and I'm sure others would be happy to help with the learning process. So please don't be shy. If we're going to move back to an every week footing, we're going to need a lot of support from the meeting on leading services. So don't be shy, and let's make this happen.
Okay. Adon Olam, page 140. Adon Olam Hashem Allah, B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'Nasa V'Chefsa Kol Azar Melech Shemo Nivra, Azar Melech Shemo Nivra, V'Acharei Kiklat HaKol Levado Yimlach Nora, V'Hu Aya, V'Hu Over, V'Hu Yeh, V'Tifara, V'Hu Yeh, V'Tifara, V'Hu Echad, V'Yen Sheni, V'Ham Shiloh, V'Achira, V'Li Reshit, V'Li Tagli, V'Lo Ha'oz, V'Ham Yisrael, V'Lo Ha'oz, V'Ham Yisrael, V'Hu Eli, V'Chai Go'ali, V'Tzor Chavli, V'Yetzara, V'Hu Nisi, V'Manosli, Menor Kosi, V'Yom בידם, מפקיר רוחי, ביד אישה, וירידה, ועם רוחי, יביא אותי, אדוני לי, ולא יירא, אדוני לי, ולא יירא.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Good Shabbos.